Hey there, welcome back to my channel. My name is Erin, and today we're going to talk about all the books I read in August. A couple were 5-star reads, and I think I might have found a new fave in there. But however, one of them was a 1-star read. So I'm going to kick off this video with a rant and ruffle up some feathers on BookTube. So can you guess what it was? Klara and the Sun. Ooh, literary darling and the most hyped sci-fi book of 2021 was the biggest letdown for me in a long time. Disclaimer, reading is subjective. We're all allowed our own opinions, and if you love this book, I'm so happy for you. You are probably the kind of person who did really well in high school English class. Good at picking out meaning and such from a book. This book has got big prescribed text energy. Future teachers are gonna force kids to read this book, let me tell you. That's my opinion. Why did I hate it? So what is this book about? So Clara is this childlike robot. She's an artificial friend that's sold to this little girl named Josie who's sick, and the plot just follows her from the shop where she's sold into her new home with Josie and her family. So she's a solar-powered machine, and she therefore thinks that the sun is this all-powerful being that can influence everything. She believes it in like a spiritual religion kind of way. And I think she makes some pretty irrational, illogical, wacky decisions based on her beliefs. But apart from that, she's a really, really passive, boring character. She's basically just an obedient servant for her adoptive family. We're told by all of the other characters how observant and smart she is, but she only focuses on shit like, oh look, those people are hugging, they must love each other. Oh look, that homeless man looks so happy when the sun shines on him. Oh, thank you, sun, you're so wise and benevolent. All the characters around her are like, wow, Clara, you're so smart. We love Clara. Because she's so focused on her family, we don't really get a look at like what could have been interesting with all the world building and the setting. Like, it's supposed to be a dystopia, and there's sort of really vague mentions about gene editing and pollution. But because Clara doesn't pay attention to that, it's barely there, it doesn't really make for a fully fleshed out dystopian novel. Part of the problem could have been that I listened to this as an audiobook, and not surprisingly, the robot sounded very robotic. But for real, it was very stilted and humorless. And also there were 2 characters in there that was supposed to be British, but they sounded just unhinged. They sounded so strange. If I came across Rick's mother in real life, her voice would activate my fight or flight response. I was that bothered by it. Something's very wrong. It's uncanny valley. And yeah, so to sum up, I don't think this book is worth the hype. I did give it 1 star. It's probably a bit harsh, but I really wanted to just knock it down a peg. I mean, it was nominated for the Booker Prize, so, you know, a lot of critics love this. I mean, you might love this, but it's not for me. Yeah, and it's the first book that Kazuo Ishiguru has released since winning the Nobel Prize, so of course expectations were high, and, you know, high expectations lead to big disappointments. Okay, so the next book that I read in August, I gave a very solid, respectable 3 stars. It is called The Mother Fault by Kate Mildenhall. This one was a much better take on a dystopian novel. It is set in a near future Australia, which has become a surveillance state, and everyone has tracking chips to monitor their every move. So it's explained that there were a lot of terrorist attacks in the lead up to this switch, and it led to everyone volunteering to get chipped for their greater good. And there's also an ominous threat of being sent to a facility called Best Life, like where they send like rule breakers and drug addicts and such. There's also strong themes of environmental degradation and climate change, which and all this combined makes for a pretty compelling world to read about, especially in an Australian context. But really what went wrong and brought down the rating for me was the plot and the main character Mim, who made some truly mind-bogglingly stupid decisions. So she finds out that her husband has gone missing and the government can't track him. and she just panics and legs it across the country with her 2 kids. This lady has got some serious flaws. She's a bad person. I mean, the book is called The Mother Fault, and this mother is at fault. So part of my frustration with this book, I think, is due to our own COVID lockdown here in Sydney. There's a lot of rule breakers out there that are doing my head in. And this book is just about one big old rule breaker, you know. She's the kind of person that wouldn't pay attention to the lockdown rules if she thought she knew better. I just hate her so much. But I mean, the book was solid, and the audiobook narration was really, really good. And it made everything really easy to picture in my head. So I still ended up liking it, even if I hated the character. Okay, so the next book I rated 4 stars. It's called The Seep by Hannah Porter. This one was a quick and quirky read. I also listened to this on audiobook, and it only took about 3 or 4 hours. And let me tell you, it packed some big concepts into a short amount of time. It's a weird science fiction novel, but weird with a capital W, similar to like how Jeff Vandermeer's books are weird, without being that dark or disturbing. It's only a tiny bit disturbing at times, but it's pretty wholesome at other times. Okay, so the Seep is an alien microorganism which has invaded Earth, and it has changed the biological makeup of humanity. I think it's led to this kind of utopian society where death and illness are a thing of the past. People can change or augment their bodies in pretty much any way imaginable. Like, I think one character turns into like a bear or something. So the main character is a trans woman who transitioned before the arrival of the Seep, so she's a really interesting perspective to sort of take in this new world through her eyes. So the plot kicks off when it's revealed that her wife wants to become a baby, as you do. Yeah, she wants to start life from scratch, to start over again. Yeah, I found the concept to be really, really interesting in this book, but the plot went off in some really strange directions. It's like there were too many ideas in such a short novel. This book was really zany and fun at times, but also dealt with like big concepts like grief and identity and what does it mean to be human, that sort of thing. I do recommend you pick this up if that sounds interesting to you. Okay, next up is a book called A Room Called Earth by Madeleine Ryan. And I gave this one a really nice 4 stars. This is an Australian contemporary literary novel. It follows a young woman on the autism spectrum and a night that she spends at a party in Melbourne. The concept is quite simple, but it's made really special by her observations and wits as she describes herself and other partygoers. Yeah, she's a person that only does what she wants to do, and she doesn't really care about conforming to other people's expectations of her. Yeah, I found her really relatable at times and unrelatable at other times. Sometimes I thought she could be quite solipsistic and self-obsessed. It's almost as if she were David Attenborough and all of the other partygoers were just zoo animals giving into their basic human impulses. So if you were to go up to this girl at a party and try and talk to her, you'd say, "Oh, so what do you do?" And she'd say, "What do I do? I don't sell my labor to capitalism, if that's what you're asking." And you'd be like, "Okay, send help." Yeah, so she is definitely a flawed character with a lot of rich white girl privilege. Yeah, like she's wearing a kimono and she thinks about putting chopsticks in her hair, and I don't know what the author intended by that, but I think it made her a little bit unlikable, to be honest. And I've heard other reviews where people like loved this character and thought she was really fun, and she is, but a little problematic. But yeah, overall it's really fun to read about a party in lockdown. So if you miss parties as much as I do, I recommend you pick this up and give it a read. Now we're up to the 5-star reads. The next book I want to talk about is called Fever Dream by Samanta Schweblin. So this one is a real beauty of a horror novel. or novella as I should say, because it's quite short. It was translated from Spanish to English in 2017. I think it's a really powerful story because it has layers in a way. So at the core of it, you've got this mother-child relationship and the horror of what could happen when a mother can't keep her child safe. And then outside of that, you've got this sort of supernatural elements, where occults, witchcrafty, unknown entities, sort of ooky spooky stuff. Yeah, and then on top of all of that, you've got this real world terror of pollution and pesticides, which is scary at a large scale. And I believe those are really big issues in Argentina, where the author is from. So altogether, it made for a really creepy, eerie, quick read, and it really sent the shivers down my spine. I recommend you pick it up if that sounds interesting to you. Okay, the next book is The Lottery and Other Stories by Shirley Jackson. Now, if you thought that a perfect short story collection didn't exist, well, this book just proves you wrong because it was so good. Yeah, I think this one could be a new favorite. I don't know, top 10, top 20, I haven't counted yet, but it's up there. I loved it. So let me start by giving you some context for this classic. When the short story, The Lottery, which is the last story in this collection, so you have that to look forward to as you read. When it was first published in The New Yorker in 1948, it caused a lot of controversy, a lot of angry letters, people canceled their subscriptions, and it's like, why? It's just a scary story. I think it caused a stir because it satirized sort of blind conformity to tradition and upset people, but also because they didn't specify that it was a work of fiction. So people probably were just really confused. It feels like a spiritual predecessor to The Hunger Games, because you definitely don't want your name picked out of this box. But it's actually the other stories in this collection which I think make it so remarkable. They are a tasty box of chocolates, and each one is a different flavor of a certain theme. It's the kind of book you could go back and reread and find lots of different meaning and symbolism in there. So it was actually first published in 1949 as a collection under a different title, which was The Lottery or the Adventures of James Harris. And while all the stories are different and have different situations about different people, there is this enigmatic James Harris character who keeps popping up or is mentioned by other characters in about half of the stories. So who is this guy? I did do a little bit of research about this, and it looks like Shirley Jackson lifted the character from an old folk song or sonnet, and it is about a wife who is lured away from her family and husband by an old lover, and he takes her by ship to hell. He turns out to be a demon, and he takes her to a watery hell. Now, I wish that there was a 2-hour-long video essay that went into great detail and depth about this character and what it all means, but it doesn't exist yet. So I want to give you my take on this, and I'm going to try not to spoil anything and not take up too much of your time. Here's what I think it all means. Here's what I think this guy represents and what these stories mean. I think this James guy is there to symbolize when a character is being disloyal to either other people or to themselves and their sense of identity or persona. And in a way, I believe these stories are a really nuanced, subtle take on possession. Possession, but not by ghosts, by societal forces, by peer pressure, by conformity. Either by influencing a character's actions or invading a person's space, either their home or workplace. The stories show how your sense of self and your identity can be taken over or changed in such a way that they may as well be possessed. Which is far more unsettling than your standard ghost story, kinda, when you think about it that way. I've done spooked myself. I feel very unsettled. I highly recommend this one if you're a big fan of unsettling, spooky, eerie books. Not scary, not too horrific, but it'll get under your skin. Yeah, 5 stars for that one. Big fan. So that is all the books that I read in August. Please let me know in the comments if you've read any of these and what your thoughts on them are. I'd really love to know. Thanks so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you feel like it. Not gonna force ya. Yeah, that's all. Love ya. Bye.